Prime Minister Andrew Holness is hitting out against corporal punishment. Speaking from the floor of Parliament on Tuesday, he said his administration is working to establish legislation to deal with the high level of violence in the country, especially against women and children. His comments follow reports of the death of 4-year-old Nashaun Brown after being beaten allegedly by his stepfather in St. Catherine. News also came on Tuesday about another 4-year-old boy, Jamar Powell, who died from gunshot wounds following a shooting incident at his home in St. James. Simone Absalom Gayle reports.
We as a society must ban corporal punishment.
Words from the nation's leader as he reflected on the tragic death of 4-year-old Nashaun Brown.
Yesterday's case of Nashaun Brown, a promising 4-year-old who was severely beaten by his stepfather, has again brought to the fore the plight of our children as they continue to face physical, sexual, and emotional abuse from the adults in their lives who have a responsibility to provide love, nurture, care, and protection for these, our most vulnerable citizens. Madam Speaker, we continued to be horrified by reports of violent and downright cruel acts being meted out to children. This should not be tolerated. In the same way we have addressed and condemned other forms of violence in this House, we must unequivocally, loudly, and resolutely condemn violence against our children.
The Prime Minister says the suspect has been arrested.
The suspect is in police custody and has been charged with cruelty to a child, assault occasioning bodily harm, and unlawful wounding in relation to the child's mother. Following the post-mortem report, it will be determined what other charges will be brought against him.
He says physical abuse is one of the most reported infractions against children, and a lot of the incidents stem from domestic violence.
Increasingly, children and their families are exposed to violence, which can have long-term devastating psychological impacts ranging from acute distress to more chronic emotional difficulties. Studies show that there is a link between adverse childhood experiences through exposure to violence and ill health outcomes. Our children's mental health is also impacted. They become depressed, anxious, and display signs of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mr. Holness notes in its research into causes of violence and mechanisms to prevent it, the National Council on Violence Prevention has highlighted corporal punishment as one of the critical factors that the nation must address.
The next frontier, Madam Speaker, yes, the next frontier, Madam Speaker, is for the government to move decisively with legislative measures to protect our children.
In his address, Opposition leader Mark Golding says criminal sanctions against corporal punishment in the home might not be effective.
I think that the process of changing the hearts and minds of the people so that violence, instead of being the immediate impulsive recourse to anger, which is what often triggers violence in this country, but instead a more measured, a more considered, a more strategically sound approach to handling the issue that has caused the anger requires a re-education of the nation, a reculturalization of the nation. Banning corporal punishment would be a symbolic step, and I think that is a trend worldwide. Within the culture of the country, you know, we, as a deeply Christian country, spare the rod and spoil the child is still believed to be a sound precept in many homes. Many of us have grown up where some minor form of punishment of a physical nature may have been imparted without any obvious lasting damage.
He furthers that behavioral change should be the chosen course of action.
Law has its role, and for us as legislators, it's always the easiest thing to draw for, to kind of generate a feeling that we're achieving something when we pass laws, banning this, banning that. But the reality is that changing behavior takes more than laws.
The opposition leader says many of the nation's laws are bereft of any impact because they are not enforced. For the news on PBCJ, I'm Simone Absalom Gayle.